we're looking at the positional demands of the game, okay? So what we're going to look at is we're going to try and incorporate it across a range of age groups. I know we have a range of people on this room, from foundation coaches to coaches of adults teams. So just to try and cover everybody, okay? And basically what the whole idea is, how we coach the positional demands so that we get the full potential out of our players and that they enjoy and they understand the positions they're being asked to play in. So a couple of things that you're going to be sick of me hearing, or sick of hearing me say across this, is to know your audience and know who you're dealing with. And we'll touch on that in a second. The second thing we'll go through then is the actual requirements of the different positions. And then throughout this presentation, I want to hammer home the fact that as coaches, we should never assume that a player should play in a certain position. So we all know situations where we go, oh, Mary has to play cornerback because her sister played cornerback on the 16s, or her mammy was a great cornerback, or whatever it might be. And that happens. I think it's an Irish trait, but we just kind of pigeonhole players. So what I'm asking you, if you take nothing else away from this evening, is just not to pigeonhole players and give people an opportunity to explore in various positions. And then lastly, then we'll just touch on finding a balance in your team. So you're a coach, you're playing a team sport. So the importance is putting together a strong team. And you do that as a coach by recognizing strengths and weaknesses that players have. Okay, so we will look at knowing your audience. Okay, so I'm going to spend a few minutes on this slide. There's a good bit of information on it. So by knowing your audience, what I mean is that you know who you're coaching and what sort of a level they're coming from. So you might have under 10 come to you, and she might have never really been coached in any position, and she was just thrown into goals for every single go games, okay? And you might need to spend a bit more time there. Whereas you might get somebody else who has rotated across loads of positions and starting to get a feel for where they like. So it's about knowing who you're coaching. So I've broken it down into these 4 areas that I'd like you to kind of think of when we go through the rest of the session. So the first one is explore. By this, we mean putting the importance and the emphasis on rotation and the exposure to all the different positions. I can't emphasize the importance of that enough, because we all want well-rounded players when they get to adult level, and we can't achieve that unless we let players get an experience and get a taster for everywhere that they play. And that kind of goes in the same vein as not pigeonholing someone into, oh, you're going goals because your mammy was the goalie, okay? The second thing then is to explore and recognize. So this is where you're starting to get an introduction into a competition environment. So basically, we want the kids and the players to still be exploring in the various positions, still getting to play in the backs, playing forwards, playing midfield. And as kids, they'll tell you pretty quickly what they like and what they don't like. And that's where you have to start recognizing your players' strengths and weaknesses. So it's not, this stage is nice because as a coach, you kind of get to sit back a little bit and you will learn and you'll get better at seeing, okay, she's very good actually at blocking or hooking, or she's actually very accurate on her shooting. And you start to kind of check it all off in your own mind, right? Okay, she could be a defensive player, she could be an attacking player. And as a coach, you can do that quietly while they're still playing their positions and exploring. Then thirdly, it's where you start to actually coach the positions, and we'll go into the positional demands in a second. But this is where you as a coach actually, you take time to spend that 5 minutes chat with somebody. Okay, we're looking at you playing cornerback. These are the attributes that we're looking for in you as a cornerback. And that's where you start to coach that. You introduce it into your drills, you introduce it into your session plans. And then finally is build. That's where you, as a coach, would jigsaw your team together. So you're after letting them explore, and they're after seeing their strengths and weaknesses. And now you're starting to put your team together. So that's where you're looking for the performance. And we all want, like Niall just said earlier on, we all want the team that's going to win the county final or the minor final. But we can't expect to have a team of players reaching their full potential if we don't do those first 2 steps especially. Okay, so when you're looking at this, I want you to look at it that this could be in one season. This could be a case of letting them explore away there for the first part of the season in March and April, and then you start to coach them in the summer when you're building towards a championship. Or you can look at it from a season back to back. It might be something that the club adopt as an ethos even, where at Go Games they're purely focused on letting everybody play everywhere at some point in the year. And as they go through the age groups and they hand over to other coaches, that this is the ethos across the place. So when they get to adult, you have a group of really strong individuals, which will ultimately make a really strong unit. So we kind of look at this, and I'd imagine when you're looking at it, you're assuming that, right, okay, grand, we'll let everybody play everywhere at Go Games, but then we'll really knuckle down and we'll really start to get serious. It doesn't have to be that way. So the way the kids learn, the way players learn, it's not always linear. So you might get somebody who's an early bloomer, or you might get someone who's a late bloomer. And a girl could come to you at 15 years of age, having never picked up the hurl before, and you can't just go, right, I have to go in now and I have to coach her every single thing that she needs to do at midfield, because you'll absolutely overwhelm her. And you have to go back and let her explore and let her go back to that stage of figuring out where she likes to play and where she's best to play. Okay, so just to move on then from the positional requirements. So because time is of the essence in these breakout rooms, I've broken them down into 4 areas. So we have the specialist positions of goalkeeper and free taker, which we'll touch on in a second. And then we'll go into backs, midfielders and forwards. So the basis of this was there was a kind of a questionnaire thing sent out to inter-county players recently about what they think the positional demands of their position is. Now, obviously that's coming from an elite point of view. So we've taken that into account, but we've also added in from our own backgrounds and our own knowledges of what it is that make up and give attributes to that person in that position. Okay, so as you can see, the game has come on a long way from the left picture to the right picture. You know, so I suppose the specialist positions is 2 things that are massive in today's modern game of camogie. So I've broken it into keepers and takers, okay? And then these categories are just the easiest way to sum up some of the attributes that you're looking for in these key positions. These 2 positions are probably 2 that are part of a lot of teams pre-match prep now, especially at an elite or inter-county level. It's something that people really zone in on to kind of get an advantage or get an edge. So from the keeper's point of view, from scoring, you're looking at them stopping and setting up scores. From a team point of view, as keepers part of a team, they're normally a person who are super organized and they're really, really efficient at communicating, mostly verbally, but also they need to have that persona, that kind of presence in the goals that they're not going to be got one over on. So their communication skills are normally quite high. You'd be looking for somebody with them sort of skills. From a personal level, they normally are confident. Now I know lots of goalies who like fake it till they make it almost, and at one stage in my career I was one of them, faking it till I make it. But they normally would exude a bit of confidence, and focus is a big thing. So somebody who, we've all seen little girls and leaning on the hurley while the ball is up the other end of the field and chatting away to the girl beside them, and the ball comes down the field and next thing they're like, oh God, where's the ball? You know, we all know them. But for a goalie, that focus has to be there all the time, because they mightn't be in the game 70% of the time, but when they need to be on, they need to be on. And then from a skill point of view, their footwork, their vision and their striking. So if you're looking for a player, those 3 things are from a skills point of view what you'd be looking out for. In the free takers then, accurate, consistent and have a distance. So this is regardless of where they're taking the free. So you'll see Chloe Sigerson from Cork, she'll be taking them from a half back midfield. She still needs to be accurate. She mightn't be necessarily hitting the ball over the bar, but she needs to be accurate in her delivery of the ball into the inside forwards. And distance, whether that's 60 yards or whether that's 21 yards, you need a consistency in that too. From a team point of view, especially in camogie, I think an awful lot of team players look up to the free taker to be a reliable source within the team and to show a bit of leadership. You've often seen lots of free takers pull teams out of fire in championship, whether that's at club level or inter-county level. And on a personal level, there's someone who can create a routine that makes them consistent, I suppose, but the important thing is they have a reset ability. So you'll often see like Joe Canning and that, they'll take a breath, they'll take 2 breaths, take 3 breaths, they'll take the same length of time over a freeze, because they're resetting. They're after maybe winning the free, or they're after having to come out the field to take the free, and they have to reset in order to be effective. And then finally, from skills, just balance, footwork and striking. Very similar, I suppose, to the goalkeeper. It's a closed skill of a puck out and a closed skill of a free, require those couple of main key skills. Okay, so from a backs point of view, I've called them backs instead of defenders because realistically in today's game, a lot of our backs can attack and can go forward. So the 3 key things that came up really strongly were to contain the number of scores conceded, tight marking, and our tackling abilities. So they're the 3 key things that we look for in our defenders. So tight marking, that's shadowing, that's knowing when to tackle, knowing when to jump in, knowing how to tackle properly without fouls and that. And then these were a couple of the other things that we look for in a person who we want to eventually jigsaw into our team as a defender. That they're able to attack opposition puck outs. So in skill sense, you're looking at batting, high catching, aerial ability. That they can support the line in front and in behind them. So this is more, I suppose, for a half back line, that they're able to support the midfielders, but they're also able to track back to give the cover to their full back line. Reading the play and their timing, I think this is a really important thing. We've often seen really good interceptions of play that have completely turned momentum, and teams have gone up and scored important scores. But it's the timing of doing that, and it's the timing of our tackling that I think is really important for defenders, knowing when to jump in, when not to jump in. And then I suppose the other thing then I'm a back myself, and I would see as imposing yourself on the game. We've all seen where a defender just absolutely dominates a player, and the corner forward or the wing forward kind of comes into a shell, and then they're no good to the team, just purely because that defender has imposed themselves into the game and onto the girls they're marking. And then finally, backs have to be incredibly organised. There has to be a system. They have to understand the system of when to tackle, when to go. And the way the game is gone, there's nearly always a runner coming with the ball, and knowing that rotation to defend. So there are a couple of things that you'd be looking for in your defenders, and attributes that you kind of keeping an eye out for, but also things that you as a coach will start to coach once you get into that coach and build phase that we touched on earlier on. From midfielders' point of view then, the 3 key things that we're looking for and that keep coming up time and time again when we talk about attributes is being able to cover the ground. We all know the fitness levels of our midfielders in the men's and women's game at the minute. Being able to link the play, so that's having the mindset to keep that ball going forward all of the time, and puck out controls. So controls, by that I mean spatial awareness, creating space for puck outs, closing down space for the puck out of the opposition of the other team, also winning the ball, ruck ball, and kind of a breaking ball basically. So there's so much to puck outs that midfielders have to take part in, that it's really one of those things that you'd be looking for really strong, dominant players. The other couple of things that came through then, I suppose the one I like here is game awareness and being in the game. So by game awareness, Noel McGrath is brilliant for Tipperary hurling. He knows when to speed up the game, when to slow it down. And more often than not, you'll see when the attack isn't on and the ball isn't ready to be delivered to the forwards, he'll take a step or 2 backwards, and he'll gain time, recycle the ball, and then the attack happens. So it's that game awareness that they are the link players, so they have to know when to go and when not to. And the other thing about being in the game, so you often see a team and you'll say, geez, where are the midfielders gone? Because if they're not in the game, the team in general normally suffer. So they have to be present and they have to be in the game nearly at all times. I suppose the other one then is a vision. So you'll hear corner forwards or full forwards saying the ball coming in isn't good, or the ball coming in is too high, or whatever. The midfielders create that vision for the attacks really in the forward line, and they have to be able to see things around them. So they're the type of things you'd be looking for in your midfielders. And then finally for forwards, so there's 4 things here, and it was interesting in the responses that we got back, because in the forwards an awful lot of responses were based around work rate, which was really interesting, because although they all put down have to score and have to be able to create scores, work rate and tackling came up massively when the forwards replied to our document that we sent out. So movement, work rate, scoring ability, and making themselves available for puckouts was 4 key things that came up as attributes for this position. So I broke this down differently into with the ball and without the ball. So if you're looking for a group of forwards and they have the ball, then we're looking at running at the defences. And in that sense, you're probably looking at your fast, your lively, and your light-footed players. You're looking at them to open up space for other players around them. So that's a vision, that's a spatial awareness as well, and also a selfishness, really. Then on the ball themselves, you may be looking for somebody with really good sidestep, create space for themselves or others, and having the knowledge and the awareness of being drawn a foul. So not in any way being cynical, but if they were caught up in a situation where they weren't going to progress, that they know how and where to draw a foul, and know the importance of drawing a foul to get a score in a certain part of the game. And the big thing then is recognizing when to go for it. We all know, like Amy O'Connor this year has been sensational in the sense that she get the ball and she just knows when to go for the juggler. And that isn't in everybody. That's just in some people, and they're the people you look out for and you go, gee, yeah, that she'd make a great corner forward or a great full forward. Without the ball, then you're looking for someone that's really going to pressure clearances. They're hooking, they're blocking, they're tackling, they're willing to do it. And they're the thankless jobs, I suppose. So you're looking for someone selfless there. And then getting out for puckouts. So they're the sort of things you'll be looking for in your forwards. So just to go on to I will touch on to the question time now in a second, but just this whole idea of never assuming. So the 2 pictures obviously are the Quaids of Limerick, who are a goalkeeping dynasty, I suppose, in Limerick, and the Jacobs in Wexford, who were unbelievable forwards when they were playing with Wexford. But although these come to mind and you go, geez, it must be in the genes to, Granny was a goalie, I'm going to be a goalie. For every 2 stories like this, there's 200 where kids have been pigeonholed into positions and either left the game or just played in a position that they weren't entirely happy in, or where they could have been absolutely sensational somewhere else. So just to get that home to you, just not to assume and let people rotate. The lastly then, and we'll go to questions, is to build the balance in your team. So this is the last stage from the graph thing earlier on. So you've sat back as a coach, you've recognized the strengths and weaknesses, and now we want you to build the team around that. So our coach and our player pathway is broken down into each age group. And if you're not familiar with it, I'd advise you to just go and get it. Look up the age group that you're coaching and go down through it. It has the tactical and the technical demands and the physical demands and even the personal demands that we're asking a player to have at a certain age group. And we have to then add in all this positional stuff to it as well. So you have to bear that in mind when you're going coaching your children. And you'll complement your team. So this is where you jigsaw your team together, where you'll have your attacking midfielder, therefore you need your defending midfielder. If you have someone who's a tight marker, you might need that person to mark a specific player. She might have to play in the other corner, so she needs to be familiar and comfortable with doing that. And she'll have that comfort factor if you've been rotating them all the way through. Okay, so the take-home message, I suppose, just to remember those 4 stages. I really encourage you to have the awareness of them, but ye as coaches, I don't want you to go away and go, right, I have to go home now and I have to teach all my midfielders everything there that was on the midfield slide. Okay, because firstly, you as a coach, you have to get used to coaching these positional demands, but the players need to slowly learn them as well. And that's what I mean by coaching the position and the player. Somebody, it might be the way you speak, it might be the language, it might be the metaphors you use, but you're going to have to play around a little bit with how you deliver it. And I'll give you an example. I was at a blitz one day, a secondary school blitz, was a girl who'd never played camogie before, and her coach was shouting at her, the coach knew hurling, knew camogie all his life, and was shouting at her for free, get into the pocket, get into the pocket. And the girl, 15 years of age, turned to me as a referee, and she was like, I don't know where the pocket is. Okay, so sometimes our adult language might not get interpreted the way we want it to be, and the positional demands can be a little bit difficult to understand at a young age. So just bear that in mind. And then the last little bit there is just add it all in according to the maturation level of the player. Okay, you're not going to go home and bombard the under 8s with all that information. All right, you're just going to add things in as they move along and as they progress. Okay, so we're going to go to question time. I know some questions have been sent in already. I'd just like to thank you for your time in listening. I know it was quick, I know it was run through, but everything will be sent on to you, and I have resources there that the lads will send on as well, obviously, with everything that goes out. So I'll open Niall up there as well for some questions.
Right, Sabrina, thanks very much for that. Yeah, so we've 6 or 7 minutes there. So if anybody does have any questions for Sabrina, just to put them in the chat box, and we do that come in on register. What I'm going to go with is, what age level do you start focusing on tactics? And that's from Margaret and Monaleen.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Margaret. What age do you start coaching tactics? So I suppose I've seen lots of things. I've seen tactic boards at Fela. I've seen that actually play out to the sense where the girls, in all of their efforts, have really tried to take on board what the coach has said. But at the end of the day, they want to go out and play, a little bit like what Niall touched on in his very first thing at the start of the session. They just want to go out and play. So I personally, my own opinion, maybe Niall, if you have a different opinion, you might say, but personally, I would be looking at an age where they can actually comprehend tactics. So I'd be looking at minor up, because realistically, like, introducing tactics at 10, 12, 14, that the child won't mentally be able to comprehend what it is you're asking them to do in most cases. But in saying that, it depends on the exposure that they've had. So like, you look at inter-county teams there, and obviously they have massive tactics that they deploy in every game. But in most cases, that's because they've been exposed to that sort of a talk and that sort of a language for a good length of time, right through playing inter-county, or, you know, maybe as adults or whatever. But they've been exposed to it, so they're able to comprehend it easier, and their speed of thought is easier, and their spatial awareness is progressed, their peripheral vision is progressed. So they're able to comprehend all those game factors that come into play, and they're able to actually use the tactics. But anything younger than that, I think I kind of just be letting them play, really letting them explore, like we were saying earlier on, basically.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for that, Sabrina. Another question in there from Lorraine and Tulla, I think, and Claire. What type of activities or drills for adults to improve positional demands? So what does that look like in an adult session if you're trying to improve the positional demands of the game for each player, or areas of positions? What does that look like? What kind of activities or games or drills would there be?
Yeah, okay. So it nearly, like, the way I had it broken down there, so say you take forwards, for example. So if you want to introduce, you're looking for some practical ideas, I suppose, but you want to break that into drills and things. With the ball, you could be looking at stuff like getting your forwards out, and you're building up the session. So they're out, they have a turn, and then they have a shot. You might have out, turn, they get a tackle and have a shot. Then you're adding in the team element. So it's out, turn, and then there's a pass. Or a decoy run if you're trying to develop a bit of a running game into your squad. Without the ball, that might be all of those tackling squares that you have. They're so draining, but you have to teach your players how to tackle when they're tired, and tackle efficiently when they're tired. So they might meet a square, the 4 corners, 2 in the middle, and they are tackling continuously with 3 balls on the outside. From a defending point of view, you might introduce a game where if they stop a score, they regain possession, or if the forwards regain possession, then they win a point, or modified games like that, where if you're looking at increasing your defending skills, you're emphasizing points and extra bonus points for defensive things like a hook, like a tackle, like a block, that they're all worth more. Midfielders, there's a couple of things. So obviously you're looking at puck outs and link play. So I've seen 2 squares either side of the field, and the puck out is coming there, or the ball delivery is coming there from the half backs, and the link play is the oncoming half forwards. Things like that, basically. There's loads of different things, but what you just need to bear in mind is, if you go back to those 3 key things that you're looking for in each area, then you modify your games and you give them extra points, extra bonus points for performing them successfully in the modified games.
Yep. No. Thanks again for that. That's Sabrina. And again, look, I think any of the different resources or different activities that we can send on to everyone, we will. And when any games or activities that you're thinking, I think try an activity or a game. If you think this is something that'll work on positional demands, try it, see how it goes, get feedback from your players, and you know yourself if it's covering a particular area. So there is no silver bullets, but you know your own team, and whatever you come up with will actually work if you keep trying to incorporate that into your sessions. I think we should have time for one more question. So explaining positions to girls, Sabrina, who don't watch games. So that's from Michael and Karen Tuchel in Cork. So explaining positions. So I suppose there's a lot of girls that watch the game and maybe understand it and they're taking everything on board. How do you explain positions to girls?
Yeah, so obviously you'd hope now that hopefully they're watching games. If it's not camogie, it's hurling. But I suppose you do have those instances like that example that I gave, and I think that there is where your individual coaching skills really come into it, and your communication to them, because you might pull aside a girl and explain to her outside of a group setting. You might just say, okay, Sabrina, look, we want you to play cornerback. These are 2 things that a cornerback does. And if the person or the player isn't very familiar with the game or doesn't watch a lot of the game, then you can't assume that they have a knowledge of everything a cornerback does, everything that Collect Armour does, or so I'd be going kind of short and sweet, and I'd be going direct. So 2 key things for that position, and talk to the person directly. So all it is literally 5 minutes before a training session or midway through. Like you said earlier on, Niall, if you pull out 2 or 3 players and you talk to them or show them something, and then you put them back into the game, that'll be worth an hour of training sessions for a player who doesn't feel massively into the game or doesn't have a massive knowledge of the game. Like I grew up watching games every weekend and every day, and but you have to remember, not every child gets that kind of exposure to games and stuff. So I go short and sweet, and I go direct. Keep it short, and watch your language. I don't mean cursing or anything, but I mean in the sense of how you explain things. So that girl that didn't know, we'll be going back to the room now in a second, but that girl that didn't know what the pocket was, okay, she'd never heard that phrase before. So just to make sure that when you're explaining, you're really simplifying it down to 2 little things, and then you can add on all the different demands as you go along. But there's lots of girls like that. I see a lot of them in schools that I'd be working with, that they don't have an awareness of the game, and you can overwhelm them or you can drip feed them, and I'd be on the drip feed side.